It's my own design. It's my own remorse. Help me to decide. Help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. There's a room where the light won't find you. Holding hands while the walls come tumbling down. When they do, I'll be right behind you. So glad we've almost made it. So sad they had to fade it. Everybody wants to rule the world. Been down a broken road now. I've been through that fire. There's angels holding on to both sides of the wire. I'm like what I need to carry you through it. Stay back or get on track, 'cause I can't have you ruin it. I said hold on, but don't hold me back. Hold on, but don't hold me back. Hold on, but don't hold me back. You just hold on. I had it rough, I had to move for a while. Locked down the house and chained up with the now. I'm coming home with everyone is invited singing. Don't bring that trouble with you. Don't bring that trouble with you.
Big time playing some big time games, and that's what we did, baby. Yes, sir.
I found a way around you, but don't take me higher. Last time the way I loved you, it just wound up tired. I'm like what I need to carry you through it. Stay back or get on track, 'cause I can't have you ruin it. I said hold on, but don't hold me back. Hold on, but don't hold me back. Hold on, but don't hold me back. I said hold on. I had it rough, I had to move for a while. Locked down the house and chained.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Backyard Football Podcast. As always, I'm Nick Hossalter.
I'm Caleb Yager. And I'm Nathan Grella, behind the scenes. You can see me on there. This is pretty cool, the nice little setup we got here.
Yeah,
Very
we're doing
excited.
things a little different this year. And first of all, I'm just going to tell you guys all the new and exciting things that are going to happen next year. So first of all, as you can see, we are doing a video recording now, which will eventually be live streamed. So that's something to look forward to. We're going to be doing 2 shows a week, one on Saturday morning and one on Tuesday afternoon. So you can either catch the live stream or all this video and audio will be posted in the usual places. We also have a lot of new show members. You can see Caleb Yager. He already introduced himself. Behind the scenes, we've got a new production guy, Josh Poindexter.
And he's sitting right next to me right now, shadowing me, learning how to do all this.
He is.
So hopefully he'll be on the small little webcam, and I'll be on the regular camera, and we'll be able to see me talking here. But today I'm back here producing, so it's going to be a full plate for me.
He is our new prodigy, and he has a lot of experience running sound stuff. So he's just figuring out how the show works, and then pretty soon he'll be doing all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Also in our coverage team, we have Carter Newcomb coming in, Jeremiah Miller, Joe Vinzel, and Alex Hughes.
Some former players.
Yeah, lots of former players. So we're getting a lot of experience. And because of all these new players, new experience, we're also going to be covering the Big Eight. So we've got Belle Vernon in now. We've got Thomas Jefferson, all of those teams. So
Former state champions, of course.
That's right. So we are expanding our coverage. We are now doing 3 to 5 games a week. So not just one anymore. It's going to be really awesome. And as I said, 2 shows a week during the season. We are also going to have post-game interviews with players, and those will be videos. So you can see all the raw emotion on their faces and everything. And we have a whole list of off-season interviews. This is really cool. So first of all, we have former West Green player Jeremiah Miller is going to be on the podcast. Then we have former Brownsville and current coach at Brownsville, Quentin Mapstone. After that, we have a PA Football News Charleroi correspondent, Jeremiah Miller, who's going to come, Peyton Trollinger.
We're sorry, Peyton.
Guys. Yeah, sorry, Peyton. I'm looking at the wrong names here. So he's going to come on the show and talk a little bit about Charleroi and what they're doing over there in a little more detail. And
then later in the summer, I believe he's also going to come on and help us preview the Cougars season as well. So might have it'll probably be a call-in for him, so that's exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, so any Charleroi fans out there, you're going to get a lot of coverage this year. And then we also have a reporter for the Observer Reporter. He's a writer, Tyler Godwin,
legend. He's the assistant sports information director at Waynesburg, but he also writes a column each weekend for the Observer Reporter, and he's just a really solid reporter. He's always there. I saw him there at a couple different stadiums last year, so it'll be exciting to have him on the podcast. He's a little bit newer to this, so it'll be interesting to kind of compare perspectives with him, because last year was his first year covering football as well. So
yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And then the big reveal, one that all of you will be excited for. I know Nathan and I certainly will, and Caleb and Josh. The Washington High School Assistant Athletic Director and Defensive Coordinator, Chase Johnston.
Chase.
Yes. And I had a chance to interview him for an article a couple weeks back, and I thought I did an all right job here. It was a little bit of a Q&A about him taking the job at Wash High and being the new defensive coordinator. That was before he got promoted to Assistant Athletic Director, so definitely exciting promotion for him. And it'll be fun to have him on the podcast as well. He's definitely a fun personality here at Waynesburg.
Absolutely. And Washington was one of the teams that we covered a lot last year. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really exciting to have somebody on the inside maybe give us a little more detail than we had last year. Also, after that, starting on May 26th, we are going to do a weekly episode covering a preview of 2 teams in each show. And that is going to run all the way through the summer. And then we will have our full season preview on August 18th. We're going to have our Hombres Alert episode on August 23rd. We tell you who all the biggest and baddest players that we cover are. And then our first live stream will be August 30th, where we preview the first week of football action. So we have a loaded slate from here until the end of the year. There's going to be lots of content. So make sure you stay updated, and we'll keep you guys up to date on all this stuff as we go through our shows. So that's what we're looking forward to next year, and now we can get into the real action.
All right, so first item of news here. We basically we did a little thing before the season ended last year called our Reclassification Guide to the Galaxy, where all of the reclassification numbers were listed, and we kind of tried to predict who was going where. And we were basically right. Now, they went about it in a weird way. They thought that they might go like local teams playing local teams, kind of. So like Laurel, Highlands, and Uniontown, and all those teams would play like Brownsville or Charleroi. Like everybody would be grouped together. So everyone in your conference would play like local teams around the area. And that plan fell through at the PIAA level. That proposal was not accepted, and they ended up going with the same system they had for the last 2 years, only with the reclassification numbers added. So we got a couple moves. If Caleb, you want to recap those.
All right. reclassification, yay, overall thoughts. So we have, for 1A, we have West Greene, California, Monessen, Bentworth, Mapletown, Avella, Jefferson-Morgan, and Carmichaels just moved recently down to 1A. And looking at this new setup here, what are you guys most excited for? Which match between these 1A teams are you most excited for, and why? Nathan, we'll start with you.
I think probably the easiest answer is the one at the end of the year. Big rivalry game returns. Jefferson-Morgan playing Carmichaels. Carmichaels is set to have an outstanding year. If all you guys have seen some of their returning players, they lose Kevin Kelly at quarterback. That's going to be a big loss for them. But if they're able to, retain that, I think they're considering moving their wide receiver to quarterback, adding a little bit extra layer of athleticism at that position for them. And their game with Jefferson-Morgan, I think, is easily the most anticipated for me. I don't know about you, but Jonathan Wolf returning for Jefferson-Morgan, a lot of Liam Ankrum, that second running back, not Cole Fowler. Their quarterback, the name is escaping me, returns for Jefferson-Morgan as well. That's just a big matchup. Two really powerful offenses with a lot of good players playing against each other, and with everyone that West Greene is losing, everyone that California is losing, I think those two programs are really going to rise to the top as far as the Tri-County South.
Yeah, and last year, Carmichaels really struggled, but as we said, they bumped down into 1A. They're now in the Tri-County South. And I know we liked Carmichaels towards the end of the year. It seemed like they were making some improvements. They were doing some of the right things. So they have some momentum going into this year, and the fact that they're going to play teams that are a little smaller, maybe a little more manageable for them, is very exciting. I think for me, the most exciting matchup is Jefferson-Morgan versus West Greene. I know we talked about how much talent West Greene's losing. Obviously Ben Jackson comes to mind. He is their program's leading rusher all time. And anytime that happens, you're going to have a drop-off. I mean, that's just unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find talent like that again. But they still have a tradition of excellence, and I think high school football, it's interesting to see, those teams, when they lose a player like that, how do they respond? A team like West Greene, a team like Washington even, that has a tradition of excellence, that has built up a bit of a reputation over the last couple of years. Those are the teams that you're looking for, and I'm really interested to see what they do against Jefferson-Morgan, especially because we talked about how good of a running back Wolf is. He's coming back, and so now you're kind of looking at, well, is Wolf the new Ben Jackson? I don't think he's going to be as good. It's hard to be. I don't think anyone's going to be as good as Ben Jackson for a long time. But he sort of fits that prototype, and so it'll be interesting to see West Greene play against someone as talented as Wolf, maybe get a taste of their own medicine. So that's a matchup I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Nick. I put West Greene in there. West Greene, losing Ben Jackson is going to be a real killer. But like you said, I mean, they have a tradition of excellence. I mean, they crushed the competition last year in their division. They just rolled past everyone. And I'm going to say West Greene versus Carmichaels, because Carmichaels moving down. It's really going to test West Greene and test how good they really are. And, West Greene can take anybody in their division, but, with Carmichaels coming down, it's going to be a real test to see, can they really beat these guys? So West Greene versus Carmichaels for me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a prove-it game for both schools,
Yeah.
Jefferson-Morgan, Carmichaels is probably still bigger than West Greene, and so West Greene's trying to prove themselves against a team that was 2A last year. That would certainly look like a nice win. Carmichaels coming in, trying to take out the champs from last year. That's going to be a great match.
All right, moving on to 2A, the interstate. We've got Washington. We've got McGuffey. Waynesburg Central moves down into 2A. Frazier. We got Beth Center, Chartiers Houston, and Charleroi. Let's give it again. What are you most excited for and why? Nathan, we'll start with you.
I think the return of Waynesburg Central to this division just adds a whole new layer of rivalries that can be benefited of. The biggest one being the return of the Wash-Iowa-Waynesburg Central rivalry, which we saw flourish in the late 80s, early 90s in this area. Maybe you see that return again. Both of these teams are really intriguing because they both lose just about everyone on their team. Waynesburg Central lost probably like 20 seniors. Wash-High barely had 20 players on their team last year, and they lost most of them as seniors as well. So two programs that are rebuilding. I think that makes that matchup really intriguing for me. I think if you could see how maybe an acquisition like Chase Johnston can work with a defense that's losing all those big bruisers up front, like Gerald Comedy, Zakai Marshall, they're all gone. They're all going to Division 1-2 colleges. How can they recover from that? There were a couple defensive line backups that got playing time last year. Guys like Cameron Carter-Greene are coming back. How do those guys transition into a starting role? I think it's really intriguing. And they're playing against a Waynesburg Central team that they're refilling just about every spot on the roster, so you don't really know how good they're going to be. Waynesburg Central has kind of a tendency, when you look at them, saying, oh, they're kind of weak on both offensive and defensive lines. So I think Waynesburg Central playing against Wash High, this is the perfect time for them to pull that, maybe an upset.
Yeah,
for
and
them.
when we were talking about the show just at dinner earlier, you said how Waynesburg pretty much loses more people than any of the other teams we're covering. And so that's going to be such a big storyline going into that game. It's going to be very interesting. And honestly, there's a lot of parallels between Wash High versus McGuffey, or Wash versus Waynesburg Central, and what we talked about earlier in Carmichaels versus West Greene. You know, it's kind of a school that sort of struggled at a higher level, but they had a little bit of success at the end. They're bumping down to take on the defending champs. So I think that's obviously a good storyline. For me personally, I'm looking forward to Wash High versus McGuffey. That wasn't as good of a game last year as we thought it would be. It was for a while, and then Wash High pulled out at the end, which wasn't surprising because they had so much talent. But as we talked about, they're losing so much. And McGuffey, they lose their quarterback. That's always going to hurt you. But they have a lot of talent returning. You know, McKinley Whipke's coming back. And so I think this is really their year. Last year was not their year. Wash High was just too talented. You know, the fact that that's such a passionate rivalry, I'm really excited to watch that at the end of the year.
Yeah, that Wash High McGuffey game, if you looked at the rosters and you look at simply the size of the schools, when we saw them at McGuffey just had their roster just filled. And Wash High, they jumped out to a 14-0 lead, and then eventually McGuffey came back, and the crowd was hyped. But then Wash High just took the game from there. With Washington losing a lot of that, I agree with Wash High, McGuffey, but also keep an eye on Chartiers Houston. They kind of have a good young core there, and they played. I remember they played Jefferson-Morgan. They beat them significantly at home. So keep an eye on Chartiers Houston with Waynesburg Central losing guys, Wash High losing guys. I mean, Chartiers Houston can really make a run.
Another team you definitely also want to keep your eye on, I think, people keep calling me crazy for thinking this team is going to be good. The Frazier Commodores return 12 contributors on both sides of the ball. They return their starting quarterback, who's entering into his junior year. They return Kenny Fine, who's probably the most talented player in this whole segment of the state, in my opinion. We criticized them last year for having a weaker offensive and defensive line, and they return everyone from there. They got a bevy of weapons to aid Boggs at quarterback. So I think Frazier could be kind of this dark horse candidate that gets some traction. Now they have a tough schedule. Mostly everyone in the interstate, and this is something that we haven't talked about yet with this interstate, is that there's only 7 teams. So to play 10 games, you're either going to have a bye or an extra out-of-conference game. And that extra out-of-conference game for Frazier, there are only 2 teams in there that have them. That extra out-of-conference game for Frazier turned out to be Ligonier Valley at home. So how is that game going to affect their season? Because it's like 4 weeks into the year. How is that game going to affect the outcome of their year heading into conference play? Because I don't think they win that game. There's not a high success rate in that game. Do they take any positives out of that game and move forward with it and entering conference play? Because I think that could be a big killer for them.
Yeah, and Frazier was getting hot at the right time last year. We went to the Frazier versus Brownsville game and saw them really turn it on. So there's a lot of potential, And when you see that kind of potential, you see that kind of momentum in the second half of the year. You see all the players that Washington's losing. You see all the players that Waynesburg Central's losing. You see the fact that McGuffey lost their quarterback. It seems like this is a very good opportunity for Frazier if they didn't have such a difficult schedule. So I think, yeah, I definitely think Frazier and Chartiers Houston could make some noise in the 2A Interstate.
Definitely 2A Interstate is going to be really interesting this upcoming year. We'll see how those dynamics play out. And we're going over to the Big 8 4A. We got Belle, Vernon, Laurel Highlands, McKeesport, Ringgold, Thomas Jefferson, Trinity, Uniontown, and West Mifflin. Well, Nick, let's start with you. Who are you most excited for?
I'm going with Belle, Vernon versus McKeesport. I mean, I know TJ just won a state championship last year, right? So obviously you would think that I would have to pick Thomas Jefferson for one of these games. But at the same time, I'm interested to see who's going to challenge them. Is it going to be Belle, Vernon like last year? Are they going to end up meeting in the playoffs in this big rivalry game again? Or is McKeesport going to be able to gain some ground? It's really a big battle for the second and third spots. So I'm interested to see what that's going to be like.
Nathan?
And I'm going to change my answer. I completely agree with you, Nick. Adding McKeesport to the Big 8 is a huge benefit to Belle, Vernon because they get that extra. There's not a huge gap between West Mifflin and McKeesport, but there is a little bit of a gap. I think McKeesport is a little bit better. They return a lot of juniors from their team last year. Bringing back that experience, I think, will aid McKeesport, maybe becoming that second team. Listen, no one's going to challenge Thomas Jefferson for the Big 8. Just about every year, it's like West Greene was last year. Thomas Jefferson is going to win this conference, but having that extra team to challenge Belle, Vernon, to give Belle, Vernon a game, I think is going to be really intriguing, and that's a game that I'm looking forward to personally. I know McKeesport only lost by 7 in the playoffs to Gateway, who ended up going to the Pennsylvania State quarterfinals or something like that. So they're a team to be very excited for, I think.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that game. I'm really excited to get into the Big 8 in general. See some bigger schools with a little more diversity in terms of what they can do on both sides of the ball, in terms of the athletes they can have. It's going to be fun to cover a bit of a wider range of football this year.
Yeah, Belle, Vernon, McKeesport, that's going to be interesting. Do you guys know how much West Mifflin is losing?
They're losing a lot of seniors as well.
Okay.
A lot of skill position players they're losing, and we'll talk about this later when we go into our college announcement. But I think West Mifflin is one of the probably 3 teams that are losing the most seniors, up there with California and Waynesburg Central.
But their quarterback wasn't a senior, was he?
I believe he was. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because they had a really talented core of guys.
Yeah,
there,
and then who tragically was shot during the season or something. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I remember they played Trinity and handled them with ease. West Mifflin, depending on how much they lose, would be definitely good competition as well.
Yeah. And I guess out of all the teams here, the only one that we covered is Trinity. So,
I mean, we talked about Laurel, Highlands, and Uniontown before the season last year, and that didn't turn out very well because they weren't very good. And I don't think they'll be very good next year as well. But we'll talk about them because they're interesting teams at least. I mean, you look at a team like Mapletown or Avella, they're not extremely interesting because there's not really a chance of them winning the conference, or there's not enough players for them to be interesting. There's not enough information.
Yeah.
But with teams like Laurel, Highlands, and Uniontown, they have fans. They're passionate about their teams, although they're not very good, and that makes them interesting to talk about.
Yeah, and it's more likely that they'll get a couple good players every once in a while that can really make a big difference. Because in high school football, having 1 or 2 great players means so much. I mean, we saw that with Ben Jackson last year. He was able to. I mean, for sure, West Greene had a really talented team. They had a great defensive line. They had a good team all around. But Ben Jackson was the heart and soul of that team, and especially at the lower levels, 1A, 2A, even up to 4A, if you have 1 or 2 guys that are just dominant at their position, it can make such a big difference.
And then to answer your question, Caleb, West Mifflin had 14 seniors graduate.
Oh, wow.
All starters.
Oh, wow. That's a huge hit.
Oh, yeah. That's over half the starters on the team gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move into talk. We kind of talked about this already with the schedule release. We talked about our favorite games going into it. But I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion with this 7-team interstate because we debated them adding Ligonier Valley into it, and that ended up not happening. They went with a 9-team conference and a 7-team conference, and that ended up creating this little bit of difficulty because you gotta have 10 weeks of the season, right?
Yep.
So there's this open spot in each interstate team's schedule. So do you think I'm assuming that most of those spots are probably going to get filled up between now and the end of and when the season starts? But I don't know. Do you support high school teams keeping that bye, or maybe adding a tough out of conference schedule? Because like Frazier, again, I mentioned it earlier, Ligonier Valley, that's going to be a key moment in their season, and you'd hate for that to just completely destroy their team. An out of conference game 4 weeks into the year, where you probably might be having a bye, where another team might be having a bye. How does that affect your team compared to another's?
Yeah, and I mean, that's really difficult. I feel like it would be nice if they decided on an all or nothing sort of thing. As in, if the conference said, we're all going to have a bye, or we're all going to play an out of conference. I just feel like it's unfair to teams on both sides, whether they have a bye or an out of conference. You know, that variation just messes, especially in high school. You know, there's only 10 games in the season. It shouldn't be that difficult to fill. Yeah. So I'm not convinced either way about which is better for a team. You know, obviously that could be a big momentum builder if you have an out of conference game. You can pick up a win without having quite as much risk. But at the same time, like you said, that could also destroy a team's confidence. You know. But at the same time, a bye can be very dangerous, you know, if you're not staying fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's got to be all in or all out. It would be kind of unfair to incorporate, all right, this team gets this team gets this. And I mean, like, it's got to be in or out.
And then the other team that relinquished their bye was Beth Center, who is taking on Elizabeth Forward at home. That's a 3A school who makes the playoffs on a consistent basis every year. That's going to be a loss for them as well. So, like, it's a very difficult subject to talk about because, you know, it could really make or break a team's season.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to a bye or an out of conference game, depending on the season, you know, if it's toward the beginning of the season, I mean, like, if it would work out for some of those teams, like, yeah, that would be nice. But what if you have an out-of-conference game, you know, right at the end of the season, you guys are getting momentum, and you guys get injuries, you know, that's going to be that's risky. I mean, I don't know. So
you got to question why they didn't just add Ligonier Valley. You know, did we ever get any sort of explanation on that, Nathan?
Not really. I'm assuming it's due to location. Ligonier Valley is closer out there with Derry and, you know, that area of Pennsylvania, and that's not a stone's throw away from Frazier. It's not as far away as you think, but it's still a little bit of a drive from a team like Waynesburg Central.
What, like an hour and a half?
Like from Waynesburg Central to Ligonier Valley, yeah, probably. So.
Yeah, and I guess teams aren't as used to that with the lower levels. I mean, Nathan and I can attest, State College has to drive like an hour and a half, 2 hours to all their games because we're out in the middle of nowhere and there's not really a lot of big teams around us. So that's something we're used to. That's something the coaches are used to. And perhaps most importantly, that's something the fans are used to. You know, it's not a playoff game, but you're still going to drive 2 hours. But with these teams, they're playing local teams. You know, they have a tradition of playing local teams. You know, it might not fly very well. They might not get a lot of support going out all the way out to Ligonier Valley. But at the same time, you know, how many parents are going to want to go see their 2A school, which finished near the bottom or at the bottom, play a 3A school that's going to the playoffs, you know?
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's a long distance away, then it's like, you know.
Yeah.
So we're just looking at the schedule. I linked it in the script for all you guys. Are there any out-of-conference games that you guys are excited or looking forward to in that first 2 weeks? It's not in the first 2 weeks, but again, I meant the Ligonier Valley Frazier matchup. I am very excited to see. Another one I'm excited to see McGuffey taking on Sto-Rox at home. That's going to be an intriguing matchup. I know Sto-Rox made it pretty far in the 1A playoffs. How does that transition to 2A impact their school? And then taking on McGuffey, which is, a much bigger school than them. McGuffey almost moved up into 3A. They were, 5 players away from doing so. That's an intriguing matchup for me because Sto-Rox has, they got a ton of weapons. They're very athletic. McGuffey has, McKinley Whipke is not taking sweeps on the outside. I'll tell you that. He's a big back.
Yeah.
Seeing those contrasting styles, I think, could be interesting.
Yeah, looking ahead. So you said Sto-Rox. Sto-Rox was a very interesting team. They had their quarterback kind of reminded me from the guy from West Mifflin. It was a very agile, very quick quarterback.
I believe he graduated, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, and he had a decent arm, but going up against like a big school like McGuffey, they reminded me of also Wash High, but I think that would be very interesting. McGuffey and Sto-Rox, who did they beat West Greene to go into the Single A final, so that was interesting.
And then going into 4A, there's a couple interesting matchups as well. Vernon at home against Chartiers Valley. Woodland Hills McKeesport at the Wolverina. Western PA versus everybody.
I'm really excited for that game.
That's going to be a fun one. I wish I could go to that. It's probably going to be because they have that tournament on a Saturday, so that game is going to be the Friday game, and then they're going to have their tournament on the next day there.
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun game. Usually Woodland Hills plays in the tournament, but I guess that's not how it's going. They're opening up with a WPIAL matchup. But Thomas Jefferson Gateway, my goodness, what a great matchup.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People are that's gonna be probably the most popular game week 1 out of any game in the WPIAL. A lot of eyes will be there. Any thoughts on any of those?
I mean, I think you've pretty much covered it. There's just, that's one thing that's nice about high school football as compared to college, I guess. You don't get a lot of teams that are playing incredibly not every big team is going to play an inferior team week 1. You have some matchups where, these coaches have to be telling their players, they're coming into their camp in August, mid to late August. And, we've, for Thomas Jefferson, we have Gateway. Yes, we won the state championship last year, but you have to be motivated right now because, if you let your guard down, this is an easily losable game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you just put easy games in the first week, all easy games, then it's going to be oh, all right. But then giving a little bit of spice to it, that's what makes it interesting.
Oh yeah.
And then I didn't want to gloss over this either. Vernon at Penn Trafford week 2. Another great game, another solid matchup between two playoff teams. I believe Penn Trafford is they're 4A. Never mind. But yeah, 4A is filled with great matchups weeks 1 and 2. And then dropping down into 2A, we were discussing this at dinner. Washington versus Jefferson-Morgan. When the schedule came out, I said, look at that game. Jefferson-Morgan going into this season has a ton of seniors coming back. Jonathan Wolf is probably going to be the most experienced and best player on the field in that game. So
it's very possible.
If the Rockets want to come out and make a statement to WPIAL football right away, that is the game to do it. Washington, it's going to be the first start for most of that team. It's not going to be the first start for most of the Rockets team. I know it's 1A versus 2A, but am I insane to think that Jefferson-Morgan can pull this upset?
Who's the head coach at Jefferson-Morgan?
Aaron Georgi, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this could definitely be a trap game for Washington. They're coming off of that pretty disappointing loss versus Avonworth that Nathan and I were at. That was the last game for a lot of their players. So they have the confidence of a true dynasty. I mean, this is a team that's in the playoffs all the time. If they're looking over this game, I think that could be dangerous. I'd say Washington probably wins 7 or 8 times out of 10.
I mean, they could be looking forward to that Clinton game the week after, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I totally agree. You know, I definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if Jefferson-Morgan wins. I wouldn't pick them to win, I don't think, just because, I mean, yes, I understand the experience levels, but it's very winnable. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't be surprised if Jefferson-Morgan won. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington won.
I mean, you look at Washington's, returning players. There's not a lot of production coming back. I mean, Michael Allen is maybe the most experienced player coming back.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
Tayshawn Levy. But, quarterback, Zach Swartz, gone.
Receiver
Zamir Robinson, gone.
Yeah.
He probably took most of the handoffs last year anyway. Dylan Asbury's gone, even though he didn't play last year. Comedy gone. Marshall gone. Chase Mitchell gone to Liberty University.
Yeah, D1. That's big time.
Isaiah Edwards is going to Wheeling. Half their team's going to Wheeling, by the way.
Yeah, we'll talk about that
exactly.
in a little bit.
There's so many unknowns. Is Cameron Carter Greene going to turn into, Zakai Marshall last year? I think that's a good question. Could Zach Doman become the mainstay of a new Washington defensive line? These are all questions that we're not going to know the answer to until they play Jefferson-Morgan. Jefferson-Morgan, not a very, heavy team on either of the lines, but
truth, yeah.
Jonathan Wolf is a man, and he doesn't have to do it all himself because he has a quarterback that is willing to throw the football. He's got another running back that can get as many yards as he can. So I'm starting to lean Rockets here. You call me crazy, but it's very intriguing.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this game in our first week preview. So this is not the end of the discussion, and perhaps we'll get some more information on the offseason and have a more accurate representation for you guys.
And probably another game that probably merits more discussion between us. Frazier versus Brentwood. Frazier's got a great home schedule this year. It's ridiculous. Brentwood and Ligonier Valley. Frazier's going to be underdogs for this game for sure. Brentwood's going to be coming, their last game was against Wash High, losing on a last-second interception or whatever.
Yeah.
Man, that's an interesting matchup for me. That's a chance for Frazier to come out and show that, hey, we're not fakers. We got all this hype in the offseason because I'm sure as people start to realize what Frazier's bringing back, there's going to be a little bit of momentum behind the Commodores.
Oh, I'd say more than a little bit. But if there's anything that could kill that momentum, it's a week one matchup against a team as talented as Brentwood. So they're going to have to really make sure that they're preparing. And, if they do lose that game, which is very possible, you just have to accept the fact that you lost to a team that was right up there in the playoffs, playing against a team as talented as Washington. So hope for the win, but I think if that's a loss on the schedule, you have to be happy with that as long as you play well.
And then probably the last game we'll talk about, New Look West Greene going at Burgettstown week 1. I think this is the game where, your demons start to get revealed as a football team. Burgettstown is going to be a very tough matchup for West Greene. Burgettstown, of course, moving down to 1A after playing in 2A last year. They did make the 2A playoffs. I forget who they lost to. I think they lost in the first round, but they were like the 3rd seed in the playoffs. This is a game that I think spells doom for West Greene a little bit because, their returning production is not that high. Nathan Orndorff was really unproven last year. He came in mid-season, and he didn't get a lot of throws in late in the year because it was kind of just hand the ball off to Ben Jackson, hand the ball off to Casey Miller or whoever, and see what happened. This is kind of Nathan Orndorff. This is his make or break game, I think.
This is going to be a really interesting match. First of all, Burgettstown lost to Riverside by a touchdown.
Oh yeah, the Cinderella of the 2A.
So
WPIAL final.
So they lost to Riverside by a touchdown, who then went on to beat McGuffey by more than a touchdown. So if you want to be irresponsible and apply the transitive property of football, which is completely irresponsible, but you could make the case that Burgettstown was, played better against Riverside than McGuffey. They played better in the playoffs than McGuffey. And I think McGuffey would be a pretty terrifying draw for West Greene, considering, what talent they're bringing back and stuff like that. So now you're looking at a team that's possibly better than McGuffey. That's going to be a really tough game. Is that home for them?
No, it's on the road.
On the road. Wow, that's rough.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. And then West Greene gets Beth Center the week after. So maybe they'll be able to get a little bit of rebound there if they can't live up against Burgettstown.
Yeah, we'll see how West Greene really battles back this year. It's going to be a little difficult, honestly. Because you're going to have to adjust. You can't hand the ball off to Ben Jackson anymore. I mean, and that kind of player only comes in once in a while. Barely once in a while.
Oh, yeah, I was talking to Jeremiah Miller, and he said that he thinks West Greene is going to go 0-3 to start off the year. And I was like, I don't know. I see 1-2 or 2-1. 2-1 probably at the best. It's just, how do you rebound against a game like Burgettstown? Because I'm already kind of starting to write them off for that. But Beth Center is a game that's very winnable for them.
And California.
California, I'd say, is more winnable than Beth Center.
Yeah.
Just looking at what California brings back, and and as we start to transition into what California brings back, here's Caleb with our off-season or our 2020 college commitment report here. We'll go class by class, team by team, discussing some of our favorite memories of all the seniors, most of which in 1A are not going to college, except for a spare few, but we'll talk about them anyway. Starting off with Avella, we won't spend much time on this. They really only had 2 seniors because their team only had like 18 players or something like that, and Justin Dreyer and quarterback Anthony Giorgetti. I don't know anything about either of those guys because they went winless. So, sorry, Avella. But Bentworth, they lose their chuck-it-all quarterback, Sean Dziak. We went back and looked at the stats, and he had 2,000 or 2,500 yards of passing or something, and they're all in blowouts. It was ridiculous. Bentworth was the air raid of all air raids last year.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because they don't really have anybody that can run block. So they kind of just threw it up for most. And he had a lot of interceptions too, which makes sense.
He's like the famous Jameis of Bentworth. Yeah. California lost a lot.
Yeah, California, this is, as far as their future, I think this is probably the worst thing that could have happened for them, is having a senior class that was this talented last year that kind of underachieved, had a really difficult schedule.
Brutal.
They played Laurel and Wash High, and they're out of conference, and that's just crazy.
Yeah.
In Beth Center, which they ended up winning, but they lose Lucas Kwalk at running back. He was kind of that, Sam Rogers type, get up and go running back. That converted fullback type, tough guy, and he was fun to watch. Coach East Ryan moved to quarterback from wide receiver. I'm surprised he's not getting a lot of more college looks, but
he's definitely a good athlete. He can move around.
He didn't really have the offensive line to move around a lot.
Yeah, he was running for his life.
Yeah, especially in the West Greene game. Yeah. Malik Ramsey got hurt early in the year, and we didn't see the rest of him, and that was a shame because he was one of the most talented players in this conference. Mason Watkins on the offensive line, Colin Tyhonis on the offensive line. They're losing their entire offensive and defensive line, and that's scary.
All
because
5 starters.
All 5 starters, and they don't have anybody to replace them.
Yep.
Not a single soul.
And worth mentioning that Sam Thomas is heading over to Marietta for school. So.
And by the way, I did my best to research all these players, but if I can't find your school, and you don't have a Twitter, I'm sorry. I did the best that I could do. So if we're gonna mention your name and say we don't know where you're going to college, just because you don't have a Twitter, and sorry.
We can only do so much.
Exactly. Most of these I found on shout out PA Football News, their commitment list. Carmichaels is losing a lot of weapons. Remember, Jonathan Lilly led the team in rushing last year. His role was kind of being transferred to Bailey Jones late in the year. Big man Kevin Kelly quarterback, really mobile, great quarterback. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten more college looks. Maybe he's gonna. I'm thinking he might go Division III sometime here soon. Maybe Waynesburg. We'll see.
Looks like a lot of key offensive guys here. There.
Yeah, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, quarterback, and 2.
A few moments later.
All right, guys, we're back. Sorry for that awkward pause. We're having some technical issues. So last we left off, we were talking about West Greene. Just to recap, Ben Jackson is going to Army. That is their big commitment. They also lose wide receiver Austin Krause, Colin Walker, Andrew Litton, Greg Staggers, and Brock Badillion. Moving on to 2A.
Waynesburg, holy lost Batman. They're losing a lot of people.
Just about everybody that has contributed to their moderate to below average success.
Running back, tackle, lineman. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're losing their starting quarterback, 2 linebackers, 2 running backs, 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive linemen, a defensive tackle, a 3rd offensive lineman, and a tight end. So,
just about everybody that contributed to their moderate to below average success.
yes.
Yeah, so Waynesburg, that's a lot of players to replace. It's going to be difficult to transition that to success, I
It's
think.
a good thing they moved down.
Exactly.
I think that definitely gave them some hope.
Mm-hmm. And although Washington doesn't have the most losses, they have the most commitments, that's for sure. We got almost every one of these guys is considering going to somewhere.
Everyone except for Martez Thomas. Everyone except for him is either committed or deciding between schools.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting if you're Washington, and also kind of scary if you're Washington because there's not a whole lot of guys that replace him coming into next season.
It shows you the amount of talent they're losing. And, I mean, you look at some of these schools. Liberty, that's 1A. I mean, that's big time.
IUP is 2A or
and
whatever.
IUP is a good team too, right? They're pretty darn good for 2A, right?
Yeah, they're usually or a AA. Like it's hard to like convert your brain to college terminology.
Yeah, Division
IUP,
2. Division 2. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But IUP is pretty good for Division 2. And then Wheeling is like a brand new football team. And they ended up getting them. They got 4 guys and they might get 5 from Washington.
Yeah, they got Zamir Robinson at wide receiver, Caleb Jackson at wide receiver, Isaiah Edwards at middle linebacker, Zakiah Marshall at defensive line, and they've also extended an offer to Zach Schwartz, who is deciding between Wheeling and Central Connecticut State.
Moving over to McGuffey, I mean, we have a couple guys, Ty Smith and Marshall Whipkey, who are undecided so far. We have C.J. Cole with West Virginia University. That's going to be interesting.
That's exciting if
walk-on.
you're a McGuffey fan.
Yeah.
You never know if that translates into an offer, or if he transfers to a school that gives him an offer.
Or maybe he just works really hard.
Exactly.
And gets an offer from West Virginia.
Yeah, that was my first option, but yes.
That's the dream. That's the dream right there.
Yeah, but I know he's very excited to be a Mountaineer, so that's exciting if you're a McGuffey fan. Another exciting thing if you're a McGuffey fan, only 4 seniors. The unfortunate thing if you're a McGuffey fan is that's Ty Smith, C.J. Cole, and Marshall Whipkey. Good thing you have Jared Johnson coming back. You have McKinley Whipkey coming back. Nate Yeagle leading your offense. That's a good thing. But 3 guys that you do not want to lose for sure.
But then again, you compare that to what Washington's losing as your crosstown rival. You got to like that difference, right?
Absolutely. Frazier, they only lost 3 seniors, 2 of which were really were effective in defensive lineman Robert Murphy, who was I remember him because he was humongous.
He was humongous.
And he was just like completely swallowing up Brownsville's offensive line in one game. Just like pancaking guys.
Yeah.
He completely controlled Brownsville. It was fun to watch him. And he's probably the best player that they're losing. Shane McGavitt was a really good, team leader, running back, fullback type guy. And they'll miss him as well. Charleroi, there's only one guy really going anywhere. That's Legend Davis, who we enjoyed talking about last year. He'll be attending Clarion. And then Beth Center's losing a whole host of guys. Devin Dingle is probably the most notable, although Beth Center had a really tough year last year after Colby Coons went down with an injury early, and then Andrew Bauer filled in for him the rest of the year. And didn't fill in for him very well. He's another senior that's going.
All right, let's bump down into 4A. This is where things get real interesting. Do you want to go over who Belle Vernon send in to college?
Belle Vernon. Let's see. We got Nolan Labuda. Is it Labuda?
Labuda.
We went to Akron. We got Gage
Roge.
Cal U. Not too far from here. Cameron Guess going to Pitt, D1. And
Kicker.
Also,
that's pretty awesome.
And Hayden Barron and Larry Calloway going to RMU. RMU is D1 school as well. And then we got Anthony Sartich, Juniata, Max Breyer, Kenyon, and finally for Belle Vernon, Andrew Paysack.
Yeah.
Lackawanna.
See,
And
we're
that's
very
a lot
thankful.
of contributors for Belle Vernon.
We're very thankful that we have a resident expert in Belle Vernon name pronunciation in
Yeah.
the production team.
Yeah.
So
Shout out.
Our producer in training is a graduate from
Belle Vernon,
the school with the yellow field.
I gotta say, we are very sorry for all the new Belle Vernon fans. We're not usually this bad. This is just the first time we've covered your team. It's bound to be ugly. We'll do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
We're very excited to be covering you guys. And how can you not be? I mean, they're losing what, 8 guys to college?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a sign of a good team. You know, that's very cool. A fullback? I mean, come on, guys. Like, fullbacks. Anytime a fullback gets an offer, that's exciting.
That means
to me.
your offense uses it a lot.
It does. Yeah.
Moving on to Laurel Highlands, they lose defensive lineman in Aaron Huey. He was the only guy that's going to college for them. McKeesport.
Cal U.
Exactly.
Yeah.
McKeesport loses Davari Robinson to Lehigh, which is a D1 school, and Anthony Biko, a kicker, to Cal U. And then the Pennsylvania State Champs, they're not losing a whole lot to college, are they? Quarterback Shane Stump was really good for them last year. I remember being very amazed watching him on TV at Heinz Field, and then later in Hershey in the state championship. He'll be going to Duquesne. Mac Duda will be attending Princeton. Daniel Diebner to IUP, and Logan Danielson to IUP. So Thomas Jefferson not losing a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty scary for everyone else.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
Yeah.
And then West Mifflin is losing a whole lot. They're losing a lot of contributors,
gosh.
a lot of guys. But only really one is going to college so as of yet, and that's Nikis Demery. He'll be going to Lackawanna and playing some JUCO ball there.
West Mifflin's losing 14 seniors. And so they were not supremely successful last year by any means. And the fact that they are losing 14 means that is probably not going to be the case this year. And unlike Washington, they're not bumping down. So they still got to play Belle Vernon. They still got to play McKeesport and Thomas Jefferson. Well, McKeesport's new, but that's going to be tough for West Mifflin. But
even though Trinity is not a huge powerhouse team, do you think they can compete more with West Mifflin this year?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Because I remember West Mifflin, they handled it pretty easily at Trinity, but with all the losses there, I mean, we'll see how Trinity does this next year.
Trinity is not overly talented,
Mm-hmm.
but they do have a lot of experience coming back. They do have a lot of guys that should be able to step up and play significantly. I just worry about that offense. Like, that offense was atrocious last year.
Oh man.
Defensively, they looked solid
Fine.
against West Mifflin
until
yeah.
McKees Demery started
Yeah.
catching bombs. But
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was crazy. Yeah, and that offense, it was just in bad decision making. It's just.
And of course, Uniontown and Ringgold, neither of them are.
Neither of those teams are really noteworthy in any way. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna take that back. Again, you're fun to cover, but they're not.
They don't have anybody going to going to play college ball.
They're not extremely, competitive as far as beating teams like Thomas Jefferson or Belle Vernon or whatever. But, there are fun teams to cover. There are fun teams, go to their field and see the atmosphere. I mean, moving into this conference for Uniontown, probably the best thing for them because you get to play Ringgold, you get to play Laurel Highlands, you get games that you can compete with. Uniontown, I believe, was maybe 5A last year or something. They weren't in this conference. They weren't in the Big 8, so it'll be interesting to see them in there. I know that's a rivalry that Quentin was really looking forward to with the regional conferences. He was really looking forward to, seeing Brownsville play Uniontown, which in the 70s and 80s was a big rivalry in this area. But it's kind of fallen by the wayside because Brownsville High School is not as populous as Uniontown is now. And that rivalry's kind of been taken away. But that'll be... But seeing Uniontown play Laurel Highlands again, that'll be fun as well. So, seeing all the Uniontown teams playing against each other. Albert Gallatin is still not in the WPIAL. I think they're enjoying their exodus. They won like 4 or 5 games last year outside the WPIAL, which are good for them because they couldn't win one inside it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But looking at Uniontown's schedule, they play Southmoreland at home, so that's the return of one of those classic rivalries. That'll be fun to see. So I think that wraps up this podcast, boys.
Pretty much. Sorry for the abrupt ending.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you are a player that is offended that we didn't say where you went to school, let us know. We will be glad to announce it on the next podcast. We want to give you guys a shout out for all the wonderful things you do and all the hard work. So please let us know. We will be glad to talk about it.
And we're beginning this, February. We got a bunch of time to grow. We're looking to grow, and really expand what we're doing. So we're
Now's
excited.
the time. Yes.
Now's the time.
All right, so let's plug the podcast. Over the Christmas break, we added this podcast to literally every single place you can find a podcast. I'm talking Google Play Podcast. I'm talking Spotify. I'm talking Stitcher. I'm talking TuneIn. I'm talking, Podchaser, Podbean.
So there's no excuses.
No excuses. You can find us literally on some pirated sites. I don't know why you
If you are
pirate
the one
podcasts.
listener on Podbean, we appreciate you, and we will
Exactly.
upload just for you.
Exactly. We don't discriminate. We're on iHeartRadio now, so we are everywhere. This stream is gonna be on YouTube. Eventually, our streams will hit Facebook. Eventually, if I have time, I'm gonna cut up this podcast. Take the interesting bits, post it to Twitter, get lots of likes. Frazier's gonna be like, "Hey, this random kid really likes our team," so we're gonna share him a couple times, and I'm gonna be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be a good time.
Mm-hmm. We're filming in a dorm room now. That could change too. pretty
Exactly.
soon.
Yes.
Hopefully,
Oh
you know.
my gosh.
This is an interesting setup. Like literally, I'm looking at them. Like this is not a comfortable setup. Originally, we had it set up so that we could film it and just see Nick, and then it was just the back of Caleb's head. So hopefully, you guys are enjoying seeing like them on opposite sides and like nothing in the middle. But we're working on it.
We're sorry for the awkwardness. It'll get better.
Yeah, there's a big bed behind where Nick is, and it's kind of, it kind of obstructs the angle of filming.
Yeah.
But this was a fun podcast to do. It's glad that we got all this gear set up. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all of that fun streaming stuff. We're not on Instagram, and I'm probably not going to do that because, like,
It's not really great for sports.
no.
Honestly.
No.
Yeah.
Let me think. Oh, yeah, PA Football News. Western PA Football does not exist anymore.
Despite what my shirt says.
Yeah, he's representing the wrong thing right now. Here, hold up the other shirt
Oh,
to the camera here. PA Football News is our new home, so go check out PA Football News for every Pennsylvania high school football news thing. There's the shirt, PA Football News. Go check it out.
Yeah.
The logo is also in the top right corner if you haven't seen it in the stream for like whatever. Sorry, audio listeners, you just didn't understand what had just happened. But
The point is, PA Football News. Go there.
exactly. Go look up PA Football News, and they'll get you covered. You can find out. If you're looking to see all of the great college destinations that different guys around the entire WPIAL is going, that's the best place to go.
Yeah, I mean, this is Western PA Football News, whatever you want to call it. This is a resource we've been using since even before we were associated with Western PA Football. Way back when we started this podcast, when it was just about State College, and we were in Nathan's basement and all that before we were in college, juniors in high school, several years ago, we were using Western PA Football News as a source for information, find out where players are going, interviews, stuff like that. So if you're into high school football, you don't have an excuse. It's really the best place around for all of your high school football needs. And we are very glad to be a part of it. But we are just one of the many services they offer, so make sure to check them out.
And then something we forgot to mention, we might be setting up a Patreon soon. Something a little bit of a kickback for all of this new technology, all this new coverage, all the new teams we're covering. It's not, it's kind of taxing to do all this, to organize, 10 different people. But it's fun, and we enjoy doing it, and we like to keep doing it. So if we do set up a Patreon, if you guys could consider supporting us, it would be of great help.
We will do it with or without your support.
Exactly.
But
if you do support us, you might get a little bit extra content. So
exactly,
we might be doing, like a post game, in the car podcast. That would be
raw
kind of
reactions.
Fun. Exactly.
Perhaps we could get more content with players.
Exactly. More video content. I know. Near the end of last year, we started using the gimbal more.
Oh.
We started making some great, recap videos. Caleb is doing the gimbal again this year, and he'll be with me and Nick every week at the best game in the backyard, Pennsylvania, at the best game, and we'll be doing the same thing for every single week. We'll be doing, a cool recap video, and I'm still thinking, we could put that recap video in the Patreon, or we could, release it by itself.
We'll figure it out.
A little bit of incentive to, for the kickback a little bit. You see that your team is going to be on the game of the week, and you want to see that behind the scenes look into the players, and that's how you help us help you.
And that'll allow us to improve our audio quality and get a better capture card, and so that the video quality and everything's better.
Oh, absolutely. I hope you all are enjoying this SD quality video, but it's because of this glorious capture card that has been the source of so much pain the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're looking into either upgrading that. I know Waynesburg University Sports Information Department is looking at helping us out with that, so that'll be exciting.
Any money that goes into Patreon goes right into the podcast, and hopefully you will see results. And maybe it allows us to go to further games. Maybe we can cover a really interesting out-of-conference game that's further away if there's a team that there's a really interesting matchup, stuff like that. So.
All right. So this has been Nathan Grella,
Nick Haushalter,
And Caleb Yager. And don't forget Josh Poindexter.
And Josh Poindexter. Josh, come on. There he is. Thank you for listening. This has been the Backyard PA Football Podcast. Have a great day.